Rattanani. Given the COVID situation, friends, we turned this into a webinar because we couldn't really arrange schedules, and we've had the pleasure of doing two of this. Today is the third in the series, and we're going to discuss today progressive business models and resilience. We have with us Eleanor O. Higgins, who is the Adjunct Associate Professor on the faculty of the College of Business at the University College Dublin. She's an associate at the London School of Economics and Political Science and specializes in teaching, research, and publications in areas of corporate governance, strategic and public management, professional ethics, business ethics, and corporate social responsibility. Um, um, Professor Higgins has earlier worked with the RTE Irish Broadcasting. She has been the senior clinical psychologist at the Irish Health Services, research psychologist at Harvard University Medical School. Dr. O'Higgins has significant practical corporate governance experience serving on several public boards and bodies and not for profit organizations across the world. She has recently been reappointed to the Judicial Appointments Advisory Board in Ireland. Her international academic leadership positions are many. I'll read only a few of them so that we have a flavor of the special guest that we have today. At the US Academy of Management, which has more than 20,000 members worldwide, she is the chairman of the Ethics Committee, chairman of International Theme Committee, Membership Committee, Academy President's Task Force on External Relations. She is with the Community of European Management School, CEMS, member of the Public Management and Governance Interfaculty Group, member of Business Ethics at the Interfaculty Group, on the editorial boards of international peer-reviewed journals like Corporate Governance and International Review Corporate Governance, the International Journal of Business and Society, Business Ethics, a European Review, Society and Business Review. I have a very long list of accomplishments. I would not read all of them. Suffice it to say that we have someone very special with us. We are very privileged to have her with us, and we'll open a conversation very soon. My name is Jagdish Rattanani. I'm a faculty member at the SPJIMR Institute of Management and Research, which is bringing you this webinar. I hand over to my colleague, Dr. Surya Tahora. Surya, can you say a few words, and then you can come back to me, and we'll open the conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jagdish. Yeah, it's true. I mean, this is how you see, the amazing richness of the guest that we have today. I mean, it's just amazing. And in addition to the titles and so on, we had a few interactions with Eleanor, and she's a beautiful person. So that is really a pleasure to have you, Eleanor, with us. So I will take just a few minutes to present and put in context this series of webinar, and just tell you a few words about this Center of Wisdom and Leadership. So I might ask you a question at the end about space. Okay, so we'll see a surprise about another center in Europe. She's like very likely. I mean, I hope we can do things together. Okay. So let me share my screen for a few slides here. So this Center of Wisdom and Leadership is a center. Yeah, so it's a center that has been really very recently. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yeah. We can.
So which has taken shape recently, really speaking, with this course that we're planning to do, and now that we have translated as the series of webinars. And the mission is very close to, the subject matter that we have been discussing. I really want to look for, create and disseminate ideas on how to get more responsible and more, let's say, sustainable society. So this touches upon what our friend Paul Srivastava in the first webinar did, responsible both Eleanor and Laszlo in the previous webinar. And then our really mission is to bring together organizations from various, let's say, backgrounds researcher, I think it's really so important to have researcher of your caliber, for example, participate to this. And also here wisdom tradition. So I could have said spirituality here. I chose to speak of wisdom tradition. So the vision is we want really to be a platform which really will be hopefully a transformative platform, okay, by creating insights and impact, let's say, what would happen in the domain of organization. So at the intersection, because we are placed in Bombay, of East and West. I think this is a field of research which has been touched upon by Eleanor, by Laszlo, also by Peter, and many others. We realize how much Eastern wisdom has also to contribute to this field of research and ethics and responsibility. So how are we going to do that? So the objective are quite clear. We want to bring together people, okay, as I said, multiple partners from corporates to non-profit to public sector, management schools and universities, and research center. So what kind of knowledge we are thinking about creating? Really, the accent here is about the multidisciplinarity of approaches. So from philosophy, which can be Western or Eastern, from neuroscience to anthropology to sociology to economics. I think, and without forgetting psychology, Eleanor, I know you're a psychologist and how much it's important to have this grounding as well. So multidisciplinary. Third thing, as I said, practice impact. At our own level, we want to have an impact on organization by designing intervention, corporate trainings, webinars, conferences. We hope to have an annual conferences held in Bombay, and we hope to have all of you participate to that and present paper and engage in discussion with CEOs and of social sector and also on all the other organizations. The area of focus, 3 area of focus, which is a lot, but I think we'll just try and see how it goes. First of all, a focus because we're in India. What kind of insight and practices Eastern wisdom tradition can offer for leadership development? So Eastern wisdom, I include obviously Hinduism or Vedanta, which is at the core of Hinduism, yoga practices. I include also many traditions like Buddhism, who have taken in India and gone and spread far east. And I include also indigenous traditions which are less looked into, like Sikhism, Jainism, and also far east, let's say, wisdom tradition like Taoism and Confucianism. I think it's time we look also at East now, as we are looking into the area of responsible business. So, standard question, but maybe can we look at it with another approach? Okay, enriched by all these dialogues and conversation and research findings. And also it has to be rooted in history, right? Not just Western history. We can look at the history of leaders, whether they are political or non-political, or religious leaders, or whatever leaders it has been there in the history of humankind. What can we learn from them? And to echo something which is recent that we all have in mind with what has happened in the US, what can we learn also from not so wise leadership, by contrast. So I will end my presentation here, and Jagdish, please take over.
Yeah, Surya, thank you. Thank you very much. We look forward to some of those meetings and associations that you're planning. Very delighted to hear that. Can I, without any further loss of time, request Eleanor Higgins to please start. The stage is yours. You can take maybe 10 minutes and present an opening case, maybe run a presentation, some slides if you wish, and let's hear from you, a kind of setting the stage for today's conversation. Dr. O'Higgins.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me and having me here to address this very interesting and interested group of people.
Eleanor, if I may interrupt, your voice is a little faint, so if you can increase the volume, it will help a lot.
Yeah, I'm just
A little bit, yes.
trying to see where I can increase.
Oh, that's perfect.
This is very. If you're a little closer to your computer, it's very nice.
Okay, if I move closer.
Yes, it's very nice.
Okay. Anyway, delighted to join with an Indian institution. And before I commence, I should congratulate my Indian friend on defeating Australia in the Test cricket.
Thank you, thank you.
I know cricket is very important in India, and my husband is a big cricket fan, so he got me quite interested to see how exciting cricket can actually be. But anyway, start off. So maybe if we start looking quickly through the presentation, where I would just like to set the scene with the sort of topics that I'm going to talk about. So the first slide of the second slide, please.
Okay. Rachna. Eleanor, your sound is still low, huh? At the moment you lean back on the chair, it becomes very low.
Okay, I better stop leaning. Don't get too relaxed.
Yeah, this is nice, yeah.
Okay. So just to introduce that I'm talking about progressive business models. It's based very much on a book edited by Laszlo and me on really a series of exemplar case studies of progressive business models. And what we're talking about are businesses that are quite different to the traditional mainstream, and the premises of these businesses are different to the traditional mainstream business. And I'll just sort of give you an overview of what we mean by business model, because the thing is, since we've actually had this book published, the notion of business model has come up very much to the forefront of looking to new ways of doing business. And because leadership is so important, and in terms of spirituality and identity, one of the common features of progressive business model companies is progressive business leaders and what they are like and why are they progressive. So I'll be giving, as Laszlo did last week, he gave some good examples, some positive examples, and I intend to use one positive example, one of many possibilities, I should mention. Also, that new business models are not in isolation. They demand new financing and governance models, and new ways of investing in business. And then I intend to say something I suppose we haven't talked about too much, but the whole notion of business models in the time of COVID and beyond. So we move to the next slide, please. So just to not go into it with great detail, neoliberal individualism is the cornerstone of mainstream business practice. And ethics and CSR are seen to be tacked on very often as something that is really, you know, if does ethics pay? If it pays, fine. If not, we have to think about it. And the whole notion of shareholder value. And the question arose at a conversation I was having a few days ago. Why should shareholders be so important over other stakeholders? When you look at it, their contribution to the business, they don't do anything. They put the money in, but who does all the work? Who makes the business thrive? So why should shareholders be so important? Now, this, I should also mention, perverted reward systems and incentives create vested interest to maintain this system. And one of the things that has always struck me is, why should a hedge fund trader make so many multiples of a nurse or somebody who really makes a contribution to society? So some of this mainstream business practice problem is perverted reward and incentive systems. And I should say, this came up last week, that this system has been very much perpetrated to start with by US business schools, but unfortunately, it has been adopted internationally. And I know that, say, your institute is something whereby this is an attempt, and SPES is an attempt to create a whole different business model, if you like, of business schools. So can we move to the next slide, please? So progressive business models, ecologically sustainable, conserving for future generations, and contributing to society. It says there, to the capabilities, freedom, and well-being of people as a society in a community. The next slide, please. Now, I just want to say a quick word about what do we mean by business models, because we hear the word a lot nowadays. So fundamentally, a business model is how we deploy our business, is how will value be created and for whom, who will benefit from the value that's created. And we're looking at progressive business models with innovative configurations and ways of doing business. Now, the components of business models, first of all, there is the value proposition. When you're in business, you usually have customers, buyers, somebody who is willing to pay you for something you either produce or service. So why would they pay you? What are you offering them? Who is your target market? Within, the range of target markets. So we have, say, the low-cost airline model. The target market is people looking for a good deal and low fares. How will you make money? So you have to, if you want to make money of some type, in order to continue to be in business, what is your cost structure? So we have cost structures, and one of the things that I have to object to these days is this notion of human resources as a cost. Human resources are not a resource. Human beings are people who work and we hope thrive within the business. The structure of the value chain. So this is who do you sell to, or are there middlemen, and so on. So say with coffee, we go from the farmer to the broker to the roaster, the coffee brewer, to maybe the shops where it's, restaurants and cafes. So all along there are business agents along the value chain. And the position of the firm within that value network, and what is the strategy of the enterprise? What is the overall vision of positioning in competitive space. So there's the reality of competition and the reality of trying to do things differently in a more, with these criteria of future respecting ecological and pro-social. The next slide. And what we have shown with our progressive business models are very innovative ways of placing the components of business models in general that make them progressive. So we found now the companies we had were all very different to each other. They had very different business models, but they were all progressive. But there were a few common features which I have to mention. One is that they were exponentially different to the mainstream, to the traditional. They did things in a totally different way, and they were radically different. So one example which I really like was DKV, which is a Spanish company, an insurance company, which made a point of employing disabled people. And the idea is that, oh, you're doing them such a favor by employing them. But in fact, it worked out tremendously well because these people were in themselves very creative because they had to be in terms of coping. And they contributed so much to the business that DKV went on to become a training ground for training disabled people who could then work in other companies. So this was a totally radical way of looking at disabled people. Sustainable, circular, frugal, the idea of not wasting resources, of recirculating resources. And indeed, one of the companies that we looked at was Armor, which is a French company that recycles print cartridges, and that was its business. Embracing paradox. So being able to sort of not say, oh, we have to either make money or be socially responsible. The idea is that you integrate both, that you can actually, by doing both, come out all the better. So you're not making these false choices. And that's a very important feature, that it has abandoned this old way of looking at business. And if you are going to embrace paradox, you have to integrate. So if you have two opposites, how will you integrate them? So it's not a matter of either or. You choose both and you integrate. And the integrating principle in progressive business is values, ethics, integrity. So it's those kinds of value systems that create integration of what might be paradox. Needless to say, these businesses are socially oriented. They look at the broader societal picture, not just economic results. And of course, they're stakeholder oriented. And one of their main features is committed leadership, which is another common characteristics. Leadership that is committed to this progressive purpose. The next slide, please. So we know the traditional effective business leader in the past, this hard charging, dynamic, charismatic, very often somebody with a lot of bling. They are very, very showing off with all their wealth, yachts, as Laszlo mentioned last week, Ferraris, etc. And they make a point of showing off how successful they are. In contrast, next slide, please. Progressive business leaders might be far less understated. They might be, and usually are, very dynamic, but very humble at the same time. So this attempt to combine or integrate humility with dynamism and purpose. They're very purposeful, determined, clear vision and direction. But what are they determined about? To fight for the greater good, to make their business part of fighting for the greater good, with clear vision and direction, yes, but reflective before taking action. So our traditional view of leaders is action man, but yes, take action, but reflect before you take action. Think through the implications for all your stakeholders. And very important, think through the implication for sustainability in the longer term. And this is the difference between myopic decision-making, which just looks at the immediate payback, versus taking a longer and broader vision. And the word purpose has come up a lot recently in business in relation to building back better after COVID. And an underlying purpose is important. Willing to disagree with popular opinion requires moral courage and inner strength. Very hard to find this type of view in business, because there are so many pressures on leaders. It does take a lot of moral courage to stick to your values and act accordingly. And of course, a progressive business leader is the arch integrator when I've talked about the importance of integration. The next slide. Okay, just a quick overview of one of our examples, which was Unilever. You have Unilever is basically a global company, but originally based in the UK and the Netherlands. I should say the exemplar we had is Paul Pullman, who was a good friend, is a good friend of one of the authors of the cases in our book, Pat Murphy from Notre Dame. Now, before I talk about Paul Pullman, and I should say that his predecessor was a man named Niall Fitzgerald. Niall Fitzgerald is a very eminent Irish businessman, and it really was Niall Fitzgerald, who doesn't get that much credit for it, who initiated the progressive business approach and the sustainable living plan. So this just describes what a big and important company Unilever is. And just that the website states that 2.5 billion people use Unilever products on any given day to look good, feel good, and get more out of life. I like that. Okay, next slide. Okay, so Paul Pullman, you'll be getting a copy of this. I'm not going to go into detail, but the important thing about Paul Pullman is he really bought into this idea of long-term sustainability. And it said, this quotation, Unilever has been around for 100+ years. We want to be around for several hundred more. So if you buy into this long-term value creation model, which is equitable, which is shared, which is sustainable, then come and invest with us. If you don't buy into this, I respect you as a human being, but don't put your money into our company. Now, that is a very courageous thing to say. In a global company which is publicly quoted. But one of the main things that Paul Pullman said and did was to eliminate quarterly reporting and earnings guidance and rejecting hedge funds as investors. So he saw, he didn't want investors who did not share this long-term view. Now, fortunately, he was able to get away with it, and investors saw that this is a really good company, so they did not desert the company in droves, notwithstanding his invitation to do so. And there you have all the awards that Unilever has got. I won't go into them in detail, but you can see them. The important thing Unilever does is that it partners with NGOs for all kinds of causes. Oxfam for hunger, population services focused on healthy behavior and affordability of health products, Save the Children. It's involved in water conservation and various other environmental NGO type projects. So you can see there the various awards, and also a prominent member of the UN Global Compact. Next slide. And there you see Paul Pullman himself has received various awards, has been at the leadership of international NGOs. He left Unilever in January 2019 after 10 years. He has founded his own NGO called Imagine to combat poverty and climate change. So he still continues even after his retirement from Unilever. Next slide. Now, one of the problems, of course, with leadership and progressive business companies is that what happens when this visionary leader departs? Unilever has been very fortunate in that the new leader, Alan Jope, has continued very much in the progressive vein started by Niall Fitzgerald and Paul Pullman. So there really has been quite a smooth succession. In fact, Alan Jope is a Unilever veteran. Again, adopting an integrated approach. I've actually seen Alan Jope appear at various responsible business webinars and so on, and he does push this for a next generation of capitalism, a multi-stakeholder model. He will not do business, or Unilever will not do business with any suppliers unless they meet certain standards for environmental practices, human rights practices, etc. Zero carbon, Alan Jope is very much, especially in the COVID crisis, looking to protect the workers in Unilever. And that is even to Unilever's contracted or outsourced people who work in suppliers, that Unilever is looking to protect their backs. Has also donated, because sanitizing products have been so important in the COVID crisis, and Unilever makes sanitizing products, has donated sanitizing products, especially in developing countries. I saw Alan Jope talking about his workers, and he said he would not make having a vaccine compulsory, because having a vaccine is an intrusive, invasive sort of process. But he would make compulsory testing and tracing of workers. He would make that compulsory. Unilever has begun to collaborate with startups for innovative sustainability. So it supports startup companies that are looking at new ways that are themselves progressive business models. And interestingly, Unilever has a no political donations policy, which is very often the root of evil in capitalism. Next slide. Now, all of these progressive companies have challenges, and Unilever is no exception. And these are some of the challenges. Having aggressive timeframes, say, for environmental goals, and this is often very difficult to meet. Juggling value propositions in diverse markets. So Unilever being a global company, that you need to look at your clientele differently in developing countries to developed countries. And existential threats. Very interestingly, there was an attempt to take over Unilever by a very non-progressive business, Kraft Heinz, which is really run by a hedge fund, 3G Capital, based in, I think, Brazil. One of the partners in this attempt to take over was the famous Warren Buffett, who really is known for solid, sustainable investment. Interestingly, they pulled back after about 2 days, and Paul Pullman called this the ugly face of capitalism. And I think it was really Warren Buffett who realized that this was not a very, it was a very anti-sustainable thing for a company like this to take over Unilever. And in fact, subsequently, Kraft Heinz has done fairly poorly business-wise compared to Unilever. And being a quoted company, Unilever, even though it takes this long-term view, there will always be some continuing short-term pressures from the stock market. And how has Unilever coped in COVID? A drop in personal grooming products, increase in household cleaning and cooking products. So it's actually done fairly well. Next slide. I just want to mention quickly, and we can talk about it later, new financing models. that progressive business requires new types of financing models. And one of the things that we're seeing are sustainable investment and impact investment. So the criteria for the return on investment is no longer simple shareholder returns, that there's a broader view to look at how well the company is doing in terms of its ESG, environmental, social, and governance practices. And it's a blended view of ESG. So a company that's doing fantastic in the environment, but not doing well in terms of its workers, is not a sustainable company, is not a progressive company. Now, the problem here is, how do you actually measure ESG? Do you know it when you see it? And also, how exactly will stakeholder capitalism to replace shareholder capitalism, how exactly will it work? Next slide. And just how the World Economic Forum, that there has been a new paradigm to adopt the UN principles for responsible investment among this new type of financing strategy. Next slide. And just to say that how do we continue this journey of these exemplar companies? How can we turn progressive business more mainstream? Can a traditional business convert to being progressive? We've seen that they can. What really can we learn from these progressive companies? And also, how can the threats be neutralized? And just next slide. And I just want to say a few words about business models and COVID. So first of all, troubling times and COVID. What does this mean in terms of how society copes, and what contribution does business have to make? So I needn't go into huge detail. To me, what is one of the biggest difficulties we are facing with COVID is uncertainty. Where do we go from here? Will we ever return to normal? What will be the new normal? And the crisis in healthcare and economy, and in a way, this sort of false dichotomy between healthcare and the economy. And we're also having a problem with the rollout of vaccination programs and availability of vaccines. I should say, excuse me, I have a friend who was a colleague of mine on the board of a big teaching hospital for a couple of years. He is a general practitioner, and he is at the forefront of a movement called Access to Medicines for All. And he, and I think I, might take a very jaundiced view of the role of pharmaceutical companies and the way they are making or not making their vaccines available for all. Other troubling features in to do with COVID, inequalities and access to remote working and learning. I'm very conscious that I'm in my warm and comfortable house. I'm able to make contact with the outside world due to broadband, etc. But near me are workers who have to go out to work, and healthcare workers, essential workers in the community and so on. And they are vulnerable, and often they are from the more underprivileged socioeconomic backgrounds. Then we have people who have lost their livelihoods, dependent on handouts if they can get them. And of course, this leads to a crisis of personal identity, which, if we're talking about spirituality, can spirituality help here? And of course, the lack of human contact. It's all very well for us to be on many Zoom calls, but we really would all rather be in direct face-to-face contact with our fellow human beings. And what are the future effects of this? There's certain convenience to it, and the fact that we can all meet here and there's people from all different continents, in fact, at this webinar. That's fantastic. But at the same time, there's a loss in terms of it would be so much nicer if we could meet in person. I really worry about the younger generation, education, education really is not the same when it's online as opposed to meeting with people, discussing with people, even though you can do it to some extent online. The social development of people, staying physically fit even. In fact, there was a very tragic incident in Dublin in the past 3 days, where a young man who was a budding soccer star, and in fact, he was being looked at, 16 years old, he was already being looked at by some English Premier League soccer clubs, very talented. Somehow, he would have been at soccer practice almost every afternoon or late afternoon this week, if not for the lockdown. So instead, he was outside near his house where people gather near some shops. It ended up there was some sort of brawl over a stolen bike. He tried to intervene and he ended up being stabbed to death. So even this type of, you should be somewhere else, it leads to, one thing leads to another. I really do worry about the addiction, well, the addiction of everybody, but especially of younger people who now really have no other outlets and are on social media and online games the whole time. That is not a very good way. I speak as a psychologist, that is not a very good means of social development. And another thing, the rise in unethical antisocial practices. Again, because we're so much more online, there are all kinds of online scams. Every day of the week, you can be offered, to invest in no-fail investments, become a millionaire. Disinformation, of course, has really risen during the COVID crisis. And in fact, the other day, I am not on Twitter. I'm not a very big social media person, I have to admit. But a friend of mine or a friend of ours who is on Twitter told us that he got a message on Twitter purportedly coming from the health services in Ireland, inviting him to come for his vaccine. But before he comes, they wanted all kinds of information about him, including his bank account details. So, of course, he was smart enough not to rise to this, but at the same time, you can picture that anxious people might have. Okay, next slide. On the positive side, leadership in troubling times gives us a heightened awareness of how interconnected we all are. And businesses have this heightened awareness of how interconnected we all are. Of course, we've seen a reduction in fossil fuel use, cleaner air, etc. A renewed spotlight on the S in ESG, social issues. How are people coping? And then we see the systemic health, we've seen the systemic health risk, and we've seen how this interconnected systemic nature of how we operate has really come to the fore. Stakeholders, the heightened awareness of stakeholders, we're all in this together. You can't, it's global, but it's also everyone. So nobody is immune, to use the term, from the COVID crisis. And also it says the emphasis on governance, thinking about externalities and stakeholders, breeds a broader vision. So companies have this vision and they may be more prepared. So these are positive effects. And it says companies with high SG ratings have outperformed recently. And finally, I think the last slide. We're all into building back better. And this is where resilience comes in. And this is where leaders with moral purpose, sensitivity, humanity, not taking advantage of other people, but being aware that we all have to work together to recover, to not only recover, but build back better. And this has raised questions of what is success? Why do we exist? It has raised a level of spirituality. And in a sense, once nothing is in place anymore, it offers the opportunity to put new structures in place, new processes in place. Then there's a quote there from Elkington, who's very into environmentalism, that out of the chaos will come the opportunity to reshape capitalism. And this whole notion of, again, the inclusive 360-degree view. So inclusivity, nobody is immune. And I suppose this is where we're all tested. Every one of us is tested in a crisis, but we see who is the leader who will come out best in a crisis and whose company will come out best. And maybe having a progressive business to start with is a good first step. Now, I think that's the last slide. Oh. And then this is actually a repeat of an earlier slide on what are the characteristics of progressive business leadership. So as I'm saying, I've just put this in relation to COVID, that this is the kind of leadership that we need. So it is just a repetition again. Okay, I'll leave it at that. Sorry, I've probably taken a bit longer than I intended.
Jagdish, you're on mute.
Thank you. My apologies. Sorry. Thank you, Eleanor. No, that was just fine. It was nice to hear you. I think you presented it very clearly, very cleanly. Let us get into a small conversation. Let us open up some of these issues. Let me get the ball rolling with a very simple question, and I will start with the example of Unilever that you have mentioned. And I don't want to discuss Unilever per se, but using the example or as a metaphor to try and understand whether solutions will lie by the model that Paul Pullman adopted, or is there something bigger and deeper here? For an example, you mentioned that 2.5 billion people, the company claims, use their products every day across the globe. And somewhere it might seem that within that large mega enterprise, however socially sensitive or however sustainable it seeks to be, there is deep wired in a sense of unsustainability, because it means moving goods across globes. It means reaching out to a large number of people across continents. And I want to ask this question and throw it open. And again, it is not the company we are discussing, but the model that might suggest that you can be large, you can be very big, and you can still be sustainable if you do some things. And I'm wondering whether that is so. Do you think so? How and why?
Well, that is a very good question, and it really goes back to this whole notion of paradox and being global and local at the same time. So, in fact, Unilever was a company, if, as I recall correctly, it adapted its products and packaging to different locales. So, for example, in the West, we might have, get the big economy size of whatever is shampoo or whatever it is you're buying. Whereas Unilever saw that the needs in, say, developing countries were quite different, that what you wanted were maybe smaller units of packaging and maybe less packaging altogether, but that you adapt your products and you produce them. Don't only produce them, Unilever products are very much trying to produce where they're actually consumed. So you adapt to the local, and that really is one of the paradoxes that has to be embraced. This global and local, reconciling the two, because the community you're addressing in India, say, might be quite different to the community you're addressing in New York City. Now, it may be more similar in big cities all over the world, but that is one thing that Unilever has tried to embrace. And although being a West European country, it has very much worked with NGOs in all different parts of the world. So it's the, what is it? Think global, act local. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but I think they really have lived that. And of course, some progressive businesses are local to start with, and they then become bigger and bigger. But even then, they have to maintain their local flavor. So, for example, one of the progressive companies we had, Sonnentor, it's an agricultural business in Austria, and it does organic farming. And one of the interesting features is that it pays its workers very well. Very often agricultural labor is very underprivileged and doesn't gets very good wages, has very bad working conditions. But Sonnentor is just the opposite. And it started in Austria, but it's now in the Czech Republic and is moving in other areas in European countries. But it's keeping its model and its philosophy.
Okay, okay, wonderful. So Eleanor, yeah, fine. That's well put. I wanted to ask you. I want to build on this a little more and ask you. You know, you mentioned and described progressive business models, and the question that comes to my mind is, why is it that we see so few of them? It would appear to me, as a layperson from the outside, that this is something very special and difficult, and you seem to need special conditions and special care to be able to build this kind of an animal, whereas the normal beast of a company is a natural growing animal and will grow and increase in size faster. Therefore, you will always have a world, will it be that way, where the model that is of the kind we may call exploitative, extractive, or whatever else word that you may use, is the majority model. Why has it become the majority? And why, even today, are we not seeing more energy? A few Paul Pullmans apart. The fact remains that hedge funds rule the roost. And let us not forget, one reason why Pullman quit at the time it did was hedge funds not allowing him to do a listing, a single structure listing in the Netherlands.
Yes, I think to some extent, I share your despair, shall we say, that it should take. Why should it take so much courage to tell the stock markets, listen, we're in this for the next 100 years. So my quarterly earnings for the last 3 months, like, that doesn't matter, you know? I'm going to concentrate on the long term. And sometimes you have to sacrifice the short term for the long term. But then, that these hedge funds or just ordinary equity investors might not be patient for the long term. So, but I think that's the kind of negative thing. Like, why is Paul Pullman so special for doing what is actually common sense? However, on the positive side, what I see is that the investment world has to some extent been pushed, prodded, and convinced maybe by the data we're getting about climate change and destruction and so on, that to some extent they have been pushed into saying, like, we do have to look at these other features of business for survival. Now, the thing is that maybe to start with, they're doing it because, we better say that we're, it's kind of greenwashing or whatever you want to call it. We better say that we're socially responsible, that, the UN now has these principles for responsible investment, and that we're buying into that. And, we have leading fund managers in the US in the Business Roundtable making a declaration about interest in ESG and so on, and these criteria. So maybe to some extent, the two worlds are coming closer together, or part of the two worlds are coming closer together. It may be now what we still have. I don't know whether anybody has followed, but overnight, there was this big attack on hedge fund traders on Wall Street with these the GameStop shares. But it was all just gambling. I mean, what I worry about is this online gambling. I worry about online gambling in, gambling businesses, but I worry about online gambling, which is better known as share trading or day trading or, online investing. And it's sort of based very often on algorithms and that are instantaneous, that have nothing to do with the substance of or the purpose of businesses being invested in. That is the other end. But there's a new end developing in terms of investment. And we can be cynical about it, but I think that is helpful. The other thing is that, so there's that kind of, we're going to grow, we're going to list on the stock market, etc. But the stock markets may themselves be changing. The other thing is the scope for innovative and new smaller companies, the likes of the Sonnentors of the world, Beresh Pharmaceuticals, which I'm sure Laszlo could tell you much more about than I could, which is a natural medicine business in Hungary, which started small, but has all the right kind of attributes of a progressive company. So that's the other end, that flourishing startup businesses, which in order to keep flourishing, flourish within their business model and don't make themselves subject to the stock markets. Another one is the cooperative form. So a cooperative wind energy company in Finland, Lumituli, which is owned by the users, and it's an alternative energy company. So when smaller progressive companies come within, they come within this model in their own way, and they start with that philosophy and stick with that philosophy.
Thank you, Eleanor. I think Peter Pruzan wanted to make a point, and then I'll hand over to Surya from there. Professor Peter Pruzan, please.
Thank you. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, I am.
Not well, but I'll try to shout.
I'll speak a bit louder. 1 second. Apparently, there's something with my loudspeaker.
I can hear you.
You can hear me. Okay. I'd like to cite a few of the words that you've used and that other people have used so far today. A few moments ago, you used the word courage to tell the stock market. You talked about the investment world. At the very beginning of your talk, when you were talking about shareholders and stakeholders, you said they put the money in. When you referred to Paul Pullman, he said, you quoted him, "Don't put your money in our company." And the final quote I've jotted down was, "Realize value for shareholders." Now, why am I citing these words? I think there's a myth, there's a kind of a mass hysteria, a lack of reflection, ignorance, whatever the correct term would be, that somehow when people buy shares on the stock market, that they're investing in a company. They are not investing in a company. When Paul buys a share of Unilever from Jack or sells it to Jane, none of them is putting money in Unilever. There is individuals buying and selling. It is seldom, very seldom, that companies get money on the stock market. The only time they do that is when they have a new mission, when they're expanding their capital. So almost all of the activity that we see on stock markets has nothing to do with people investing in companies. It is gambling. It is gambling, not of the kind that you're referring to, but it is people who put their money in the stock market are gamblers. They are not putting money in a company. They are buying and selling to each other as individuals or as pension funds or whatever it is, but it is seldom that that money goes into a company. So when people use the word investing, I'm investing in IBM, it's nonsense. They're not investing in IBM. They're gambling that the price that they paid to whoever it is who's selling the stock to me is going to increase. And I think that we could probably spend a long time discussing that. I just want to say that it is a mindset that is so pervasive, that so dominates almost all thinking in people who are economically interested, and more people are now because more and more people are quote, investing in the stock market. It is a myth that somehow they are contributing to the development of society. They're gambling, they're doing it to appreciate, hopefully, gamble their own wealth. They are not investing in corporations. So this is just a reflection which is very seldom made, and I don't think that most people have ever really thought about that. Finished.
Thank you, Peter. Eleanor, would you like to respond, and then Surya takes over the conversation from there?
Well, I have thought about it a lot, and I think this is where, so it is gambling, and even more pernicious is online day trading, which is totally gambling. And in fact, at the moment, I should mention that certainly in the US, there is a big stock market bubble going on, and everybody is quite worried that we're heading into a crash quite soon. This bubble and crash type of idea. However, even within that gambling, it's buying and selling. It's buying on the assumption that I can sell at a higher price than I bought at. But this is where the original purpose of the stock market, which was to invest in companies that then hope will thrive and contribute to society, has been made more and more remote. But I would say there's two things I just want a point to make. Who are shareholders? You and I, if you have a pension, then you're a shareholder. We may all be shareholders in this. So this thing about sort of denigrating shareholders, to some extent, I want to be a bit careful about it. I want, like my pension fund in my university, where I have a pension, to do well. However, I don't want them to do well by investing in bad companies or in fossil fuels or etc. So
but they're not investing in the companies. That's the point they're making.
Yeah, but the point is, but the point is that now there are funds, ethical funds, etc., that may eliminate investing in certain companies or may choose to invest in certain companies. So I think the movement toward impact investing is creating a greater awareness that this is not a casino, that in fact, there's something at the end of the line that's getting our money. Now, we wanted to make money, but there's something at the end of the line for which we feel somewhat responsible. So, I mean, I'm a bit, I can be cynical about ethical funds, but at the same time, I think there's a hope there. The other thing, as I said, are companies that are not necessarily quoted on the stock market. That they can be thriving, progressive companies with new modes of governance and new modes of fundraising. So like, the John Lewis Partnership, for example, is owned by the workers, or Luma Thule, which is owned by the users, for wind power. So there are new models that are not necessarily even on the stock market. And I think we need to sort of think about the whole array of possibilities. So while I gave Unilever as an example, there are other examples as well. But I agree with most of your points about, the casino element of share trading. But I think we have to look at that maybe, impact investing is getting closer to the original purpose of why we have a stock market.
I think I'll just, one final comment here. I agree totally. We're all directly or indirectly shareholders by the pension funds or direct our own activities. I most certainly am. I have a considerable savings invested, to use that good word, invested in stocks. The point I'm trying to make though, is that when we think, it's the mindset that we have. We somehow consider ourselves as investing in companies. We are not investing in companies. It's wonderful that we have ethically oriented and environmentally oriented, that John Elkington is doing his work and what. Wonderful, I agree. I've been myself in my earlier years very active in that kind of work. The point I'm trying to make is we have this mindset that somehow we feel that we're all investors in this great game, and we're not. When we're doing it, we're really gambling, whether we're a day trader or whether we're a pension fund, whatever it is. So it's wonderful that there are reflections going on, that there are pension funds that are much more ethically oriented and whatnot. I think the point I'm just trying to make has something to do with the awareness that we have as to what is really going on. It is very seldom that companies are deriving, that people are actually making investments in companies, and that companies, one of the main reasons that companies also are so focused on the stock market is because so much of the salaries and bonuses that leaders are getting today are dependent upon the stock market. So the company, the CEO and leaders in the company have a vested interest in that stock price going up, not because it's helping the company. The company is not deriving money from that. It's because their own earnings and their own bonuses are increasing. I'm just trying to make these points to increase our awareness of what really is going on. No more words from me.
Yeah, no, actually, the last point about the bonuses, I think is really, really important. Because that's the other thing about mainstream business, the perverse incentives, in a sense. And I think this is where one of the examples we had last week of Triodos Bank that Laszlo mentioned, that the salaries of the leaders of that bank are not in that sense this market-based, that they have modest the leaders have modest salaries and there's much less inequality among the salaries. And I think this whole notion of playing on greed, you know, if we're talking about progressive companies and resilience and so on, that emphasizing greed is not going to lead to general resilience among us all. But I'm glad you brought up the perverse incentives, Peter.
Surya, can I ask you to take over the conversation? And you have a lot of questions on your plate.
Yeah, so see, one point, thank you, Peter, I mean, for pointing out the pervasiveness and the perversity and the deep groundedness of some mindset that we have. Okay, I think this is one of the examples you gave, but we can cite so many. I would like to link it to one question I have, Eleanor, for you, which is you have cited many times the word spirituality in your presentation. Okay, and we know also from the book that you have written with the Laszlo that you have cited the name of Ivan Chouinard from Patagonia, who seems to be inclined towards Buddhism or some form or whatever of spirituality. So my question is the following. Do you think really spirituality has a role to play in this movement towards progressive models of business? Or can we do without? Or, and if you think there is, because it seems that you have, since you have citing the word, what would be the elements of this spirituality that can help and have an added value over just ethics, for example?
Okay, I think it depends on how you define spirituality. So it can go all the way from, you know, a deep religious belief to much more almost, I would say, a humanistic approach, which in itself can be spiritual in its own way. So I think that in terms of, say, our progressive businesses that we had, the spirituality, now there may have been some leaders, you know, who were spiritual, maybe Hinduism or Buddhism would be very important, but many who, you know, it didn't come in an explicit way, but it comes in implicitly in terms of the way people conduct themselves with their own dignity, and very important that they recognize the humanity and dignity in other people, whether especially if it's people who work with them, people who are in their value chain, shall we say, who work in businesses. So, for example, Illy Coffee, which was one of our companies, that it was one of the earliest coffee companies to work with farmers in developing countries, and to want those farmers to be an essential part of their business, and for them to have a fair return and a good life. So it's thinking about the good life of people. And this is where maybe the social part of the ESG, you know, equation comes in, that you want a good life for yourself and for other people, that we're all in it together. And in a sense, it's a form of spirituality. It may not be, and it may in fact form part of some religions. Some Eastern religions may be more than Western religions, but so it's not necessarily religiosity, but it's a feeling of being part of the human race, of behaving to other people in a humane and respectful manner. In that sense, maybe the golden rule, treat people as you would want to be treated, is at the bottom of it. But recognizing yourself as among a community of people, whether that community is your local street or a global community. So for example, in the whole COVID crisis, I think we have to see ourselves as a global community.
Yes, thank you, Eleanor. What should we do? I have still one question, but should we open to the audience? What do you think, Jagdish? I think there is one thing which...
Yes, I think we are open. We are very happy to open to the audience. Questions can come up on chat, and we'll read it out. And while we await some questions, Surya, if you have any more, go ahead. Or
Yeah.
I can, or I'd like to go. Yes.
I have one question which connects you, Eleanor, with Laszlo, because I know you are both actively involved in the European SPES, SPES, right? And the mission of this SPES, from what I've read, is to introduce spirituality in business through education, research, and encouraging practice. Very closely to what is also the mission of our center here. So can you say a few words, please, Eleanor, about what are the recent initiatives of SPES that you can highlight, and especially maybe about management school, education in the space of management school, or any other, if you like. I have no problem.
Well, I think SPES, first of all, I want to say the person who I hope to hand over to on this question, I don't like handing over, but I think the best person to answer that is Laszlo.
Laszlo, yeah.
But I do want to say, I think SPES is such an important force for good in the business school environment. Because as I said before, one of the really malign influences of business schools is the whole, the model of US business schools, which has become the kind of model for business schools worldwide, which model themselves, if you like. So if you want to see, in a way, an anti-progressive business model, that is the anti-progressive business model. So I think SPES as an organization is an attempt to counter that. And I think is doing many good things, has many good initiatives, both in the past and in the pipeline. But as Laszlo is the director of SPES and the real initiator, and the thing about Laszlo, I hope, Laszlo, you won't mind my saying this, is that he's so great at getting people together behind an idea because he's so committed to it and so inspiring about it. So I think that's the importance of SPES. But I think Laszlo would be best placed, if you don't mind, to just say a few words about the initiatives that SPES is doing.
Eleanor, before that, I just want to, compliment you for saying what you said about Laszlo, because this whole series is a result of Laszlo holding our hand and taking us on that path. So this wouldn't have happened but for him. So thank you. And Laszlo, please, let's hear from you.
Yes, just some very, very few words about the European SPES. So maybe two things, that when we started this movement about no, exactly 20 years ago with some small circle of friends, including Peter Pruzan and the late Professor Chakraborty from Calcutta, Luc Beccard and others from Europe. So in that time, this was spirituality in business, spirituality in management. This was a very, very strange, obscure idea, and something, especially in Europe, something like, you know, you are just kidding. No, come on. Even ethics in that time, ethics was too much in business and business schools, not to mention spirituality. So, but also surprisingly for me, in the last 20, 15 years or so, it became accepted. So nobody is asking that why do you so enthusiastic about spirituality in business. So I don't want to say it became mainstream, but it's well accepted, even in top mainstream business schools in the US and in Europe and some places in India and in Hong Kong, for example, or Singapore, in some places. So this is success. No, but what we want to do is to really to inspire people in different cultures, in different faith and spiritual traditions, to work together. To work together, business school people, business people, academics, young people, to work together. And I think the main mission of the SPAS, and probably we are good in that, to connect people, to connect exceptional people, and do something creative project together. And we have a lot of initiatives, but just one thing to illustrate this, and I stop.
Yes.
So we have a project with Princeton University on it's called not spirituality, but humanities for business. Humanities for business. Whole humanities, arts, literature, these kind of things can be introduced and used for business education. And so this is an example what we try to do. Also, we have a strong project in Oxford, the virtues and economics, and so on. So, but our mission is, and I stop, our mission is to bring together very special people to do very special things in very, very high level settings, high profile settings. So this is our mission. And the last thing I can mention is that in this spirit, we organize really a very high profile international conference in Hong Kong, at the University of Hong Kong, on Buddhist economics. So this is the right place for Buddhism in Hong Kong, or Princeton is the right place for humanities and business. Oxford is the right place for virtues and economics and so on and so on. So we have Asia-Europe project, and this is somehow related to that. So we are looking for developing more connections, more collaborations, more ties in India and beyond.
Thank you, Laszlo. Yeah.
Yes, Surya. So we are at 18:40 India time. Should we have one more question, or should we wind up? What would you say?
Maybe one question from the audience. Do we have some question on the chat? I have not had time to look at that.
There is a lot of discussion going on the chat,
Okay.
and it was around Professor Peter Pruzan's remark, and we had a nice exchange of ideas, and there are more views than there are questions, and so I could probably, so there are questions within those views, and I'll distill them. And can I offer one, Eleanor, and then we could wind up with that if everyone agrees. I wanted to ask you, so given the stage that we are today, do you think that businesses will need some kind of a glide path, as it were, to slowly go to a more balanced stage? Or do you think the way out is to demolish existing models? Demolish the myth of the markets and the stock markets in particular. Because some will argue that inherent in a global scale business is capital, inherent in that is shareholder and the drive for shareholder value. And that entire model is willy-nilly going to go in the same direction. So do you think we need to demolish, or do you think we need to make correctives bit by bit and go slowly on a glide path? How do you see this?
Oh, that is like the $64 million question. I sometimes feel despair. For example, what has been going on overnight with this GameStop shares and the battle between Wall Street and individual retail investors. They're all after the same thing that Peter was talking about. It's just who's going to be a more successful gambler. So this model of capitalism has got to go, but it is very persistent. Now, I see two maybe chinks of light. One is, as I said before, this movement toward recognition that market value is not the only criterion for investing, or that the things that influence market value are no longer just sheer profit or return on assets, etc. That the things that influence market value are more human types of really progressive aims, ecological, future respecting, and social. So that in a sense that those will dictate value. If we continue to have a stock market at all. The other aspect of it was the Eglinton quote that if there's another crash, out of the chaos, can we build back better? We have different forms of chaos at the moment. We have COVID, we have what could very well be another stock market crash. That might be a way of building back better. But I don't know whether, there's going to be another just reverting back that will somehow survive it and reverting back to the same old thing. Or, will we have a different form? The other thing is actually going back to the progressive business models, the different businesses that we had in our book, and I'm sure there are many, many, many others now springing up, to ignore the stock markets, to have a new form of organization, to have new forms of business, to be more open to new forms of business that can thrive in society, that can create value in different ways for more people, rather than for shareholders, be they pension funds or whatever type of funds, or hedge funds, etc. So I would hope this movement toward ESG investing, plus different forms of business, plus maybe, but I wouldn't be that confident that out of the chaos will come something better. I see those as possibilities, but I don't think it's going to be an easy glide, Jagdish, to something better. I think it may be a very bumpy road.
So we have a long ride ahead. Yeah, yeah.
Maybe I can just mention one thing.
Yes, yes, Professor. Yes,
Manas Chatterjee.
yes.
I about 10,
I can't hear you very well.
yeah, I about 10 years ago, I organized a meeting in Moscow on management education in countries in transition. And we want to have another meeting this year, at the end of this year. And the whole idea is it's not only the stock market, it's the area of marketing, in media, in supply chain, in area in MIS, in all these areas, we need a different perspective. And that's particularly in the developing countries. What we are doing here, we are just copying what is done in the United States and the Western world about management education. So we need a different approach about how to teach students in the management schools about really the principles of marketing and principles of finance, principles of MIS, principles of supply chain, disaster management, all this stuff in such a way that will meet the requirements which Eleanor is going to discuss. It's not only just the stock market, it's question of marketing, the question of supply chain in the case of disaster management, in the MIS, the question of teaching schools and teaching online, and also leadership, this question of transformational leadership, like Mahatma Gandhi and the Martin Luther King and their principles of management and leadership, and that those type of things has to be taught in a business perspective. Another thing is very important, which Eleanor maybe did not mention, is the question of conflict and peace. I mean, the question of everything we discuss, Eleanor, is in the area of business, but it's very much involved with the business and society. Question of conflict in the area of armaments and military expenditures of different countries. There's a lot of implications of the decisions. Political field has implications in business areas. That type of thing, those type of things should be taught in business schools, particularly in the countries in transition.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, again, the silos in business schools, marketing versus strategy versus finance versus etc. But I think the ambitions that people have, I remember up until quite recently, but it is changing a bit, the only ambition MBA students had was to go work for Goldman Sachs. Yeah. That was like, you really made it. If you don't get Goldman Sachs, well, maybe get the next one down. But that was their ambition. I think that's changing a bit. So I totally agree with your point about the role of business schools and the models we teach and the role models we teach. And also, what people then do, how they use their business school education can also help to change the way businesses run.
Thank you.
Very true. I think we have had a fascinating conversation that has stretched way beyond all timelines, and it's a tribute to the quality of the conversation and the participants and all the professors who are with us, national and international, that we have been able to run this. Surya, can we now draw this to a close by saying a big thank you to all of you? Dr. Eleanor or Higgins, thank you so much. Thank you, Professor Manas Chatterjee, Peter Pruzan, Laszlo, Neil Hofstra, who's with us, so many others who are there. I won't take every name. And we look forward to meeting you the next Friday, where we have a similar conversation with Professor Pruzan. We hope that will be as interesting and probably stretch a little more on time. I think we are 30 minutes off schedule, but that's wonderful. I think very nourishing. Thank you so much, and take care. Have a nice day. Thank you.
Thanks to everybody.
See you all next
Thank
week.
you. See you all next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Eleanor.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
That's
See you.
it.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.
Rashna, thank you. Surya, thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you, sir.
Rashmi.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye, Neil. Bye, Karuna. Thank you.